Today, I'm going to tell you a terrible story about how a tattoo changed the life of a young woman, or rather, tragically ended it. On May 25, 2009, an emergency call was made to the emergency services in Portland, USA, reporting a fire. When the fire was extinguished and the firefighters were able to enter the building, they discovered a horrifying scene. In the room, surrounded by crosses and other religious objects, lay a completely charred body. But the most terrifying part was that the corpse was headless. Zoe Sarakis was born on March 25, 1991, in the city of Portland, located in Cumberland County, Maine, in the northwestern United States. She grew up with her loving parents, John and Linda Sarakis, her older brother Gregory, and two half-sisters from her father's side, with whom Zoe always maintained good relationships. John Sarakis was a builder, and thanks to his job, was able to support the family. From an early age, Zoe was surrounded by creative stimuli and showed a strong inclination towards art. She also loved animals, and her home housed 5 cats. As Zoe grew older, she became increasingly restless and curious. She was fascinated by the idea of traveling and experiencing other cultures. She also started following a vegan diet, which involved consuming only vegetables and avoiding meat and animal products. This lifestyle included an ecological culture of protecting animals, the environment, and health. In 2005, Zoe started attending high school, where she had a large group of friends who described her as a happy, joyful, and positive girl. In 2008, on her 17th birthday, Zoe surprised everyone with a decision that her parents did not like. She dropped out of school. Ken Coonan, the principal of the school Zoe attended, said that the girl refused to talk and discuss the reasons why she did not want to finish her junior year. Ken remembered Zoe as a very nice girl, and her classmates spoke highly of her. He added that the teenager interacted a lot with other energetic and creative young people like herself. A few months after Zoe dropped out of school, she began working at a local bakery and coffee shop named Bagel Works. On March 25, 2009, she turned 18 and eagerly awaited the day to get a tattoo on one of her arms. She chose a design inspired by the Austrian artist Gustav Klimt. Zoe could not imagine that fulfilling one of her biggest wishes, which was supposed to celebrate her entry into adulthood, would put her on the path of a person who would forever change her destiny. Having a clear idea of what she wanted to depict on her arm, Zoe went to a tattoo parlor in the Old Port area and met Chad Gurney, a 27-year-old tattoo artist. It seemed that they immediately took a liking to each other, and just a few days after meeting, Zoe agreed to become Chad's girlfriend. She was not at all bothered by the fact that he was 9 years her senior. Chad was a very unique young man. He attended high school in Wells, Maine, where he became known as a lacrosse goalie, a contact sport played between 2 teams using a small rubber ball and a stick with a long handle. After finishing high school, Chad moved to Lynchburg, Virginia, to study at Liberty University, known for being headed by the famous evangelist pastor, Jerry Falwell. Chad's body was covered in tattoos. His skin bore dozens of drawings, mostly of aliens. One of them, depicting a crocodile in gray tones, was particularly striking. In the world of tattoos, alien drawings can mean 2 things. 1, that the person believes in the existence of beings from other planets, and 2, that it reflects the individuality of the wearer, who is trying to say that they do not fit into this world, that they are different from others, and that they are original. As for the tattoo of the reptile, it is said to symbolize danger and hostility, a predator to be avoided. Chad was also a fan of underground and alternative dance known as hardcore, which involves wild and even aggressive movements, but with complete control over the body. It's not about inflicting pain on oneself, but about releasing energy through lunges and jumps, as well as acrobatic stunts that few dare to attempt. People who knew Chad said that the young man had difficulty recovering from a terrible car accident that occurred 4 years before his move to Portland. In 2005, Chad sustained serious injuries in Alabama when the Liberty team was traveling to a lacrosse game. A local van carrying players and coaches was rear-ended by a car and pushed into oncoming traffic, where it collided with a large truck. The severe impact ejected Chad from the vehicle. He nearly lost his leg and underwent about 20 surgeries. Due to a strong head injury, he underwent psychiatric evaluation, which revealed that he suffered from cognitive impairments affecting his speech, memory, and mathematical thinking. Chad became financially independent thanks to the seven-figure sum he received from a lawsuit after the accident. 2 years later, in 2007, he underwent treatment for anxiety and depression and was diagnosed with an organic personality disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. In 2009, Chad traveled to Hawaii alone, planning to continue exploring the world. This passion for travel and curiosity about other cultures connected him with Zoe. The couple adopted a relaxed and unconventional approach to their life together. After they started dating, Zoe and Chad agreed on an open relationship, meaning they could see other people. In May 2009, Chad went on another trip, this time for a weekend in Vancouver, a city on the Pacific coast of Canada. When he returned to Portland, Zoe regretfully confessed to him that while he was away, she had been with another man and allegedly had sexual relations. At first, it seemed that Chad was not troubled by this episode of infidelity, as they had previously agreed to maintain an open relationship. However, after this confession, an understanding Chad began insisting that Zoe leave her job and go with him to Thailand for a personal spiritual quest. The girl rejected her boyfriend's proposal, not suspecting the terrible consequences it could lead to. On May 25, 2009, Zoe came to Chad's apartment in the afternoon and decided to take a nap because she felt very tired. While she was sleeping, Chad grabbed her by the neck, hit her on the head, and strangled her until she stopped breathing. Then, he engaged in sexual activity with Zoe's lifeless body before decapitating her. According to records, after committing the heinous crime, Chad took a shower, got dressed, got in his car, and drove to the nearest gas station, where he filled a canister with gasoline. He then returned to his apartment and doused Zoe's body in the lower floor of the building with gasoline, laying a trail to the front door before igniting the fire in the apartment. Chad took a backpack he had packed for a trip to Thailand, a laptop, and a shotgun. When the apartment caught fire, he went to an ATM, withdrew cash, and checked into the Old Orchard Beach Motel, where he got into a jacuzzi and waited. Meanwhile, a call to the 911 emergency service was made, alerting them about the fire. Authorities immediately responded and were able to extinguish the flames. When they entered the building, they were confronted with a horrific scene. Among the ashes lay a charred corpse, surrounded by crosses and other religious items. A neighbor immediately called Chad to inform him that his house had burned down. The young man responded that he was not in town, as he had gone to his hometown of Lewiston, and then he quickly hung up the phone. On Tuesday, May 26th, Chad spoke with his best friend and told him that he had killed Zoe. While explaining what happened, he seemed calm and rational. Chad said he was tired of the pain and just couldn't restrain himself. While he was talking to his friend, he was driving through the streets of Portland and carelessly ran a red light, getting stopped by a nearby city police officer. Chad insisted that his friend explain to the police officer who had stopped him over the phone that he had been in an accident in 2005, which could have caused mental health issues. After the phone call with his friend and the encounter with the officer, Chad went to the police and confessed to Zoe's murder. The police then confiscated his belongings. On the hard drive of his computer, a computer crimes investigator found a video recording with the description, "Woman half decapitated for suspected infidelity. Well, at least if she cheated, she won't do it again." This evidence was later admitted in court. On Wednesday, May 27th, at the high school where Zoe had studied, her memory was honored with a moment of silence during classes. Teachers and students were informed about the incident during lunch. That same day, a room was set up in the school where social workers and counselors were available for grieving students. After some time, Christine Cosno, Zoe's stepsister, made the first statement on behalf of the family. She told local media journalists that she wanted the public to know that this was an unusual murder because Chad had committed a lot of evil. According to Christine, detectives told her that in a rage, Chad had attacked Zoe, sexually violated her body, and set it on fire. Then he calmly went to a motel and got into a jacuzzi. A week after Zoe's murder, on Tuesday, June 2nd, 2009, a vigil was held in front of the apartment building where Chad had lived. It was a moment of consolation for Zoe's friends and family. Many strangers, shocked and outraged by the brutal crime, also attended. Estimates suggest that over 150 people gathered to pray and remember Zoe. They also placed candles and flowers on the steps of the building where her life was tragically cut short. Zoe's father, John, and her stepsister, Courtney, came to the scene of the tragedy and were touched by the support of so many people. Meanwhile, the police began interviewing Chad's friends and acquaintances, who agreed that the young man had a split personality. According to them, he sometimes portrayed himself as a person on a spiritual quest, with religious artifacts throughout his apartment and plans to travel to Thailand to study Eastern religions. Some said that Chad was kind and charming, often giving people small gifts. They mentioned that he often spoke of wanting to use the money he received from the accident for the good of humanity. At the same time, Chad enjoyed his image as a tough guy with tattoos covering his arms and his provocative and confrontational behavior. Robert Collins, a 24-year-old chef who knew him, noticed that people often shrugged and turned away when Chad came to a party. Robert recalled that Chad once told him that the only thing he identified with was pain, and he even remembered that the suspect had this word tattooed on his knuckles. The police and the prosecution made great efforts to gather all information about the brutal crime. Deputy Attorney General Bill Stokes reported that the judge had ordered the seizure of court documents. Steve Whiter, who rented an apartment from Chad in 2006, was also questioned. He mentioned religious paintings and artifacts in Chad's apartment and said Chad told him he was interested in theology but did not practice it. Watson Atkinson, owner of another tattoo parlor in Portland, shared that Chad once confessed he wanted to use his accident compensation to find himself. Watson added that Chad seemed focused on teenage girls, which concerned him so much that he forbade his 16-year-old daughter from interacting with Chad. He also said he had repeatedly warned Zoe to stay away from him. Watson noted that none of Chad's close acquaintances could imagine or realize how dark his thoughts could be. During the initial investigation, Chad's previous medical history and diagnoses concerning his mental health were also revealed. However, while in custody, Chad underwent evaluations by several psychologists who found no evidence that he was suffering from delusions or hallucinations. During conversations with the specialists, Chad admitted that he had strong feelings about Zoe's infidelity and that it had disappointed him. According to court documents, he claimed to be tired of the infidelity of all his girlfriends. These conversations revealed a depressed Chad who began to contemplate taking Zoe's life when she confessed her unfaithfulness to him. He told 3 different psychologists that he engaged in sexual acts with her remains because he thought he had already committed a terrible act and was only thinking about what worse he could do to his victim. When Chad's trial began, a 127-minute police interrogation conducted 12 hours after the crime was leaked. During the interrogation with a detective named Danham, Chad said that he and Zoe got along very well. He noted that she occasionally stayed in his apartment for about a week and that they had no arguments. Chad claimed they were soulmates and that she always tried to be honest with him. He stated that he had taken the life of the most beautiful girl he ever knew and added that he owed it to his 18-year-old victim to tell the truth. During the conversation with the detective, Chad remained composed, constantly apologized, and cried several times. Chad recounted that on May 25, 2009, Zoe was napping. According to him, he approached and began to strangle her. She tried to fight for her life and screamed for him to stop. Chad said that when Zoe tried to resist, he hit her on the head and continued to strangle her until she stopped breathing. He then described the atrocities he committed with her body. At this point in the interrogation, Chad stated that he used 3 knives, not a samurai sword as initially thought, for the decapitation. He added that he then placed a cross between his legs and talked about everything he did while her body burned in the apartment. Describing the events, Chad constantly called himself a terrible person. When asked why he decapitated Zoe, he replied that he was trying to turn her death into a ritual of forgiveness. When asked why he did it, Chad struggled to find an answer. He then stated that he felt possessed and that on the day of Zoe's murder, everything in his life dimmed. He explained that for several hours, he became a wild, primitive beast in his basic instincts, and that's why he committed such a monstrous act. This interrogation became an important piece of evidence presented in the Cumberland County Supreme Court. During the initial hearings, prosecutors played the entire 2.5-hour recording for Judge Roland Cole. There was discussion that Chad faced a minimum of 25 years in prison and a maximum of life imprisonment. It was also suggested that if his mental disorder was acknowledged, he might be sent to a psychiatric center in Augusta. During one of the hearings in 2011, it was established that the accused had strangled the victim in a fit of anger, but it remained open whether Chad, who had waived his right to a jury trial, agreed with this. At that time, prosecutors argued that the former Liberty University student and lacrosse champion was fully aware of what he was doing. They called a psychiatrist and psychologist to testify about Chad's mental state, all of whom opined that the young man knew what he was doing and understood his decision to brutally kill his girlfriend. However, the defense continued to focus on Chad's mental health issues, arguing that the defendant was ashamed and afraid of losing control over himself. On January 11, 2012, Chad's attorney attempted to convince the Maine Supreme Court to dismiss evidence found on his client's personal computer when he was arrested. This evidence included a gruesome video in which he explained how to decapitate an unfaithful woman. The defense argued that this audiovisual fragment should not have been admitted into the case. In March 2012, nearly 3 years after the heinous crime, 30-year-old Chad Gurney was sentenced to 50 years for the murder of Zoe Sarakis and 25 years for arson. The judge ordered the sentences to be served consecutively. Chad's lawyers filed an appeal against the sentence, but it was rejected. Zoe's family members had hoped for a life sentence. During the sentencing, the presiding judge stated that it was clear the defendant did not perceive the world normally, but the issue for the court was whether he understood that his act was wrong. Sarah Churchill, Chad's attorney, argued to the Supreme Court that the brain concussion and other injuries Chad sustained in the 2005 accident left her client in a constant state of delusion. She claimed the judge erred in finding Chad guilty, particularly because the search warrant should not have extended to his smartphone, laptop, and social media page. She argued that instead of considering evidence from the smartphone and laptop, the court should have given significant weight to the evidence of Chad's psychosis and alienation at the time of the crime. The Deputy Attorney General responded in court that the accused killed Zoe in retaliation for her being with another man. He mentioned that the video suggested inflicting injuries as punishment for infidelity, which the accused termed as betrayal. The deputy stated that no information from social networks was used in the case against Chad, and concluded that the evidence that the man knew what he was doing at the time of the crime was overwhelming. After the verdict, Zoe's aunt, Kathy Kosnev, told journalists that during the trial of this monster, she felt breathless at the sight and voice of him, which made her recall the agonizing and terrible final minutes of her niece's life. In a world where innocence should be cherished, the unthinkable occurred. The 8-year-old Sandra Cantu's life was cut short on March 27, 2009. The culprit behind this tragic incident was Melissa Huckaby, a 28-year-old Sunday school teacher who shocked the nation with her involvement in Sandra's killing. From incriminating notes to disturbing evidence found in Melissa's possession, each revelation painted a harrowing picture of deceit and betrayal. In the small town of Tracy, California, a shocking event unfolded on March 27, 2009, when 8-year-old Sandra Cantu vanished without a trace. The community was gripped by fear and uncertainty as the search for the missing girl intensified. When the horrific truth emerged, the town was shaken to its core. Sandra had been drugged, violated, and ultimately murdered by Melissa Huckaby, a fate that no innocent child should ever endure. Adding to the chilling nature of the crime, Sandra's lifeless body was discovered concealed within a black suitcase, a grim and haunting detail that further intensified the shock and horror felt by the community. The news of her tragic fate left everyone in a state of disbelief as they struggled to come to terms with the loss of an innocent life. As the investigation unfolded, a web of deceit and secrets began to surface, exposing a shocking reality that would leave everyone stunned. Sandra Cantu was born on the 8th of March, 2001, in Tracy, San Joaquin County. Later, she was moved to Orchard Estates Mobile Home Park in Tracy, California, alongside her mother, grandparents, and 3 older siblings. She lived with her mother, Maria Chavez, and 3 older siblings, Miranda, Simone, and Thomas. Even though Sandra's parents, Maria and Daniel, had been apart for a long time, the kids maintained frequent phone conversations with their father and maintained a positive relationship with him. Sandra loved to play with her friends in the neighborhood and made new friends easily. She had a lot of energy and was always eager to start conversation with anyone, including adults. Her beautiful smile and positive attitude made her a favorite among her peers and the adults who knew her. But little did she know that fate had something else planned for her. Sandra was a second-grade student at Melville S. Jacobson Elementary School. On March 27, 2009, around 2 p.m., 8-year-old Sandra returned home from school and was eager to share her day with her family. Later, she went to play with her friends outside. All the kids in the neighborhood were usually outside playing. Maria, Sandra's mother, usually let her play outside, calling her back for dinner each day. Sandra changed into her favorite Hello Kitty top and black leggings, hugged her mother, and ran out to join her friends. As dinner time approached at 7 p.m., Sandra still hadn't returned home. This was when Maria started to feel anxious. She decided to call some of Sandra's friends to see if she was with them. Maria got increasingly worried, sat in her car, and started driving around the neighborhood, asking everyone she saw if they'd caught a glimpse of Sandra recently. To her shock, no one had seen the little girl for hours. So at 7:53 p.m., Maria made an urgent call to 911 for help.
Well, I have a missing daughter. Okay, how old is she? She's 8. When's the last time you saw her? Oh, about 3. She told me she was going over to this one girl to play, and she hasn't been home. And I went looking all over.
When Maria reported her daughter missing, the Tracy Police Department quickly arrived at the mobile home park. They started searching the neighborhood, asking Maria about what Sandra was wearing when she was last seen. Maria mentioned that Sandra had on a pink Hello Kitty shirt, black leggings, and Hannah Montana flip-flops. The police officers went from house to house, talking to neighbors to see if anyone had seen Sandra or noticed anything strange in the area. They even showed Sandra's picture to everyone. The officers were thorough in their efforts, making sure to cover all bases and gather as much information as possible from the community. Their dedication to finding Sandra and uncovering any potential leads was evident in their systematic approach to questioning neighbors and sharing Sandra's images in the hope of bringing her home safely. But unfortunately, the police did not find any trace on March 27th. So the next day, on March 28th, the police sought assistance from the FBI, initiating a search effort that involved cadaver dogs, helicopters, and a large number of volunteers dedicated to finding the missing 8-year-old. Detectives then also showed the photos of Sandra to everyone around, hoping for any leads. But unfortunately, no one had any information about her whereabouts. The search for the missing girl was a harrowing time for the Tracy community. Dozens of local volunteers joined forces with 230 professional search and rescue personnel from 16 different agencies to scour the town for any signs of her. The U.S. Coast Guard went a step further, mobilizing a C-13 military plane equipped with cutting-edge cameras to assist in the aerial search over Tracy. Soon, Sandra's disappearance was all over the news channels. Initially, authorities set a $2,000 reward for anyone who could provide information that might aid in locating Sandra or uncover clues about her disappearance. The amount swiftly increased to $30,000 as Sandra's case captured significant media coverage.
A missing 8-year-old Tracy girl, it continues this morning.
Investigators say Sandra Cantu walked away from her home at the Orchard Estates Mobile Home Park in Tracy. KCRA3 Sherikina Shams live in Tracy where the search continues right now.
Well, good morning. Behind me is the Orchard Estates Mobile Home Park. You can see Tracy police are stationed out here, and we've watched this morning as they've stopped and questioned people driving out of the mobile home park to get their day started today. Now, this is part of the police investigation unfolding in front of us. There's also what the volunteers are doing, and there's been an emotional search for the little girl.
And I wish we didn't have to be here, and I wish she was at home with her family, and I hope if somebody has her, they bring her home. She needs to be home with her family and her friends and all these people that care, because we all care. That's why we're all here.
And that's the voice of just one of some estimated 300 volunteers looking for the girl over the weekend. 8-year-old Sandra Cantu is Hispanic, 4 feet tall, and weighs 45 pounds with brown hair and brown eyes. So far, what we know from that surveillance tape is that it shows little Sandra Cantu leaving the mobile home park about 4 p.m. and then returning and then walking away again. So the question, where did she walk to that last time that she was being seen on that tape? And where is she today is what everybody would like to know. The investigation out here continues. Police say if you know anything, you're urged to contact Tracy.
Everyone searched for her, but still no traces were found. Later, detectives checked the surveillance camera that was installed by Sandra's grandfather for security. The recordings showed Sandra leaving the house and heading towards the park to play. Upon her return, she seemed content, skipping back towards home at 4 p.m. However, instead of going inside, she made a surprise turn, walking down the street leading to one of the exits. The footage suddenly ended at this point, leaving a mystery surrounding her next steps. This unexpected behavior raised concerns, as Sandra typically followed safety rules about leaving with family. The police suspected that someone or something familiar to her might have drawn her attention. The initial suspect for the investigators was Sandra's father, Daniel, since the police investigation revealed that he had not seen her in a long time. They also learned that he and Maria were involved in a financial dispute related to custody issues. But Maria told the detectives strongly that even though she and Daniel had problems as a married couple before, Daniel would never have anything to do with Sandra going missing. Maria said that Sandra loved her father very much, and that they got along well together.
Soon the media took Daniel's interview about her missing child.
Tell us a little bit about what we were reporting today. Kyle, saying that you had gone to Mexico. Speak to that.
What would you like me to say about it?
Obviously, you're not in Mexico.
I'm right here in front of you. All I know is I received a call from my sister stating that my daughter was missing Friday, and this was on a Saturday. I rushed out here. I stood for a day, and I needed to get back for my job.
And I think that the reason why it's important for us to do this interview is because if the attention is taken off of you, then the attention can be put on the real person, if there is a person that abducted Sandra, or the search, instead of these things that are kind of thwarting people.
It's like I told the detective, do everything you need to do your job to the best of your ability. So, do your job, do the best thing you can do. I thank you for all your prayers. I love you. If you can get to a phone, dial 911, babe. Call somebody, run, do anything you can do. But please try and get home.
Sandra's father said to the interviewer that he had no clue about his daughter. He was swiftly eliminated as a suspect following a thorough investigation.
In a week since 8-year-old Sandra Cantu left home to play in California and never returned, authorities in Tracy are tracking down hundreds of leads this morning and raising the reward for information on the girl.
Investigators are sifting through trash in the local landfill, searching nearby rivers.
Later, the police were informed about some more questionable individuals who were either residents of the mobile park or seen in the area on March 27th. One such person was an unfamiliar ice cream vendor who interacted with children in the neighborhood on that day. Despite initial suspicions, he was soon cleared of any involvement in the case. Another individual who drew suspicion was a man named Frank Waller, who lived near the Cantu family, rumored by locals to be a pedophile. This man was acquainted with Sandra and had allegedly been seen kissing her on the lips 2 years prior to her disappearance.
They've also spoken with this man, Frank Wohler, a neighbor who admits he kissed the second grader on the lips 2 years ago.
Impulse, just being friendly. I do this to some of my students also.
FBI agents and Tracy police have searched nearby homes.
The police asked about Frank's presence at the station for questioning. During the interrogation, he confessed to being attracted to girls around 9 to 10 years old, claiming it was harmless. Despite the disturbing nature of his admission, the authorities eventually eliminated him as a suspect, though they stated they would maintain surveillance on him. The search for the perpetrator continued. As the community held a vigil, Maria found comfort surrounded by family, investigators, and neighbors who gathered around her home to support her during this difficult time. Suddenly, something surprising happened. At 8:30 p.m., a neighbor, Melissa, rushed over to investigators in a state of shock. Living just a few miles away from Sandra's family, she had discovered a handwritten note near a mailbox. The note was so disturbing that she couldn't even catch her breath before sharing it with the officers. It contained a troubling message. Cantu locked in stolen suitcase, thrown in water, on Bachetti Road and Whitehall Road. Witness. The message was scary, but what really stood out was how strange the note looked. It had obvious spelling mistakes, like someone was trying to hide who wrote it. So many questions were going through everyone's minds. Was it even real, or was it made to confuse the investigation? The discovery of the note left everyone with more questions than answers. Before moving further, the investigators needed Melissa to come in and give her statement. The FBI conducted an interview with Melissa, considering her roles as a neighbor and a Sunday school teacher at her grandfather's church, where she served as the local pastor. Melissa told the officers that she had faced difficulties in her personal life, going through a divorce a few years back and a recent breakup. Currently, she lives with her grandparents and her 5-year-old daughter. Sandra and her sisters often visited Melissa's trailer to play with her daughter, fostering a strong bond between the two families. As Melissa sat down with the FBI agents, recounting the events, she admitted that in the moment she found the note, she didn't pay much attention to her surroundings to see if anyone else was there, nor did she notice anything else out of the ordinary that might have raised suspicions. The detectives asked Melissa if they could search her car, and she said yes. They started searching the car and they found something in the glove box, a post-it note with some words written on it. But they noticed that the words were scribbled over, like someone tried to hide what was written. The police then sent the note to experts for further evaluation. Following this discovery, they chose to release Melissa and shift their attention back to analyzing the original note found near the mailbox. Weeks went by, but authorities could not find any traces of Sandra. After 10 long days of searching for Sandra, her case took a shocking turn.
Tonight, the police chief tells us that the person or the persons responsible for the death of 8-year-old Sandra Cantu will be brought to justice. Now, Sandra Cantu's body was found inside a black suitcase that was located at the irrigation pond by farm workers this morning off of Bachetti Road. Now, police then took that luggage from the pond and transported the bag to the county morgue, where this evening police identified the body of Sandra Cantu. Now, right now, police cannot tell us the exact cause of death, but investigators tell us Sandra was identified by the clothing she was wearing. Now, investigators say the area where Sandra's body was found, search crews did in fact comb through that area. Now, we're told the irrigation pond was filled 2 weeks ago, and authorities believe the luggage floated to the surface. Sandra's body was only 2 miles away from her home. News of Sandra's death has devastated a number of people in the community.
But they have to pay for this. They have to pay it in the worst way.
Did you know Sandra or the family in any way?
No, but it feels like you do because, you know, just like you kind of feel everybody else's pain.
On April 6th, farm worker Jose Luis Franco came across the black suitcase while he was draining an irrigation pond. The suitcase was locked and had an additional cord securing it, as if someone wanted to keep it closed for a longer period. When they pulled it from the mud, the weight of the suitcase filled everyone with a sense of dread, as they feared their worst fears were about to be realized. The grim discovery inside the suitcase left everyone reeling in shock and horror. Inside the suitcase, Sandra's lifeless body was curled up in a fetal position, still dressed in her black leggings and beloved Hello Kitty shirt. Sadly, Sandra's body had many cuts and wounds. A torn piece of cloth was tied around her head, covered in blood, and made into a noose. The scene was a chilling reminder of the brutality she had endured, sending waves of shock and sorrow through all who were touched by this tragic loss. Later, the farmer who found the suitcase was interviewed.
It was a discovery that confirmed one family's worst fears, and strangely enough, will wind up helping his. On April 6th, Jose Luis Franco saw a suitcase floating in a dairy pond, and his reaction was almost automatic.
I called the police immediately because I was very aware of the missing girl. I see it every day on the news, and I have kids of my own, so it's on my mind. So when I came across and saw the suitcase, it looked very suspicious.
Police took over after Franco's tip, and the search for Sandra was suddenly over. For alerting authorities, this father of 4 and husband is getting a hefty reward, $20,000.
Well, what am I going to do with the money? Well, hopefully we could save it for our children's education.
Franco says he wasn't even aware of a reward when he made the...
Soon, Sandra's body was sent for autopsy for further investigation. The autopsy results only added to the horror and shock surrounding Sandra's death. The autopsy uncovered grim details. Sandra had been severely assaulted. Although there were no signs of biological fluids, the injuries indicated the use of an unknown object. Her cause of death was asphyxiation. Additionally, the coroner found a high dose of alprazolam in her system, suggesting she had been drugged. The official cause of death was documented as homicidal asphyxiation. Tragically, it was determined that she had been murdered just mere hours after she was last captured on surveillance footage, a chilling realization that sent shockwaves through the community.
The search for a little girl missing in California is now a hunt for a killer. The body of 8-year-old Sandra Cantu was found hidden not far from her hometown. CBS News correspondent John Blackstone has more.
Hundreds gathered to grieve and pray near Sandra Cantu's home last night, lighting candles and creating memorials in honor of the murdered little girl. Ever since she disappeared, volunteers in Tracy had been determined to find her. Now, the city's police chief is determined to find her killer.
We will be determining the person or persons responsible for this reprehensible act, and we will bring them to justice.
After finding her lifeless body, the investigation was then focused on finding the monster responsible for such a heinous crime. With the disturbing details of the sexual assault, police quickly pieced together a profile of their potential suspect. They believed their perpetrator to be a white male, aged between 25 and 40, with a history of sexual assault or possessing child abuse material. This individual was likely acquainted with Sandra, possibly a trusted neighbor residing in the park. The investigation revealed that Sandra's killer was not a random abductor, but someone she knew. All the registered sex offenders in the area were thoroughly checked, and their alibis were verified, ruling them out as suspects. The investigation took a shocking turn when the neighbors near the irrigation pond were questioned. One resident who lived close to the ditch shared a disturbing observation. Despite not recognizing its importance initially, he mentioned seeing a dark purple two-toned SUV in the area on the day Sandra disappeared. The car's unusual color and unfamiliarity among the neighbors raised suspicions, as it was parked in an unusual spot near the swampy area. Most people avoided that area, making its presence even more peculiar. Intrigued and concerned, the neighbor decided to investigate and approach the car to identify the driver. However, to his surprise, the car was empty. Later, he got even more confused when a woman suddenly came out of the trees. She said she had stopped because she needed to use the bathroom. Without saying much else, she hurried back to the car and drove away fast. The neighbor was left feeling very puzzled by this strange thing happening in that quiet, lonely place. The neighbor's description matched a woman named Melissa Huckaby. Soon, investigators checked the CCTV camera of Sandra's house. The camera footage confirmed Melissa drove the same type of car. The surveillance cameras showed Melissa getting into her SUV from a parking spot right across the street from Melissa's house around 3:30 p.m. She drove towards her own house, which was to the left of where Sandra lived. Melissa then went to her grandparents' church before being seen by the resident near the pond around 5:30 p.m. This timeline was shocking, as it placed Melissa in the area around the time Sandra went missing. The police now had a prime suspect in the case. Law enforcement strongly suspected Melissa Huckaby as the perpetrator and sought to re-interview her. However, when they approached Melissa, they learned that she had attempted suicide by ingesting razor blades. Melissa was hospitalized, preventing the police from questioning her until she was discharged. However, she insisted she was completely unaware of what had transpired and stated that her only action was bringing the note to their attention. Melissa told the officers that at 4 p.m. when Sandra was last seen, she had been at her church, decorating her classroom, and had not witnessed anything out of the ordinary in the area. Unsurprisingly, the police asked Melissa to verify her alibi. Her phone records proved to be crucial evidence. It was revealed that Melissa had made her own call to the police earlier to report the theft of her suitcase from her driveway. She claimed that after hearing about Sandra's disappearance, she had even sent a text message to Maria. "Tell the police I had something stolen today around 4 p.m. I don't know if that makes a difference or not." The stolen suitcase played a crucial role in the investigation, as the black Eddie Bauer suitcase that contained Sandra matched the one Melissa had reported missing. Adding to the significance, the note Melissa found didn't just mention a suitcase, but specifically referred to a stolen suitcase. Despite the substantial evidence they had gathered implicating Melissa, the authorities sought additional information. They opted to wiretap her phone and patiently waited for her release from the hospital. After 2 days, when Melissa was released from the hospital, the police were stunned to learn that she had called the Cantu family. In the conversation, Melissa invited one of Sandra's siblings to her home to play with her 5-year-old daughter. Immediately responding to a residence, The officers discovered that there were no children inside, suggesting that Melissa may have been plotting to entice another young victim into her house. In a shocking turn of events, another neighbor came forward with a disturbing story. They informed the officers that just before Sandra went missing, Melissa had taken a neighborhood child to the park without permission from their parents. Upon the 7-year-old girl's return, she exhibited signs of confusion, slurred speech, and difficulty walking. The girl's parents took her to the hospital. Tests at the hospital showed that she had been drugged with benzodiazepines, the same drug found in Sandra's body. Melissa said she did not give the girl drugs, and the police did not charge her with anything. As the investigation unfolded, the police's suspicion of Melissa grew stronger. The police were astonished upon discovering the drugged child. Subsequently, they were granted a warrant to search both Melissa's trailer and her grandparents' church. During the search of the trailer, they came across a notebook. The handwriting inside the notebook was an exact match to the note Melissa had claimed she discovered on the ground. The police were stunned to uncover this crucial piece of evidence connecting Melissa to the note. Later on, the experts analyzing the post-it note found in Melissa's car's glove box made a shocking discovery. The note contained the cryptic words, Pachetti Road, Whitehall Road, and water, adding a mysterious layer to the investigation. They also found alprazolam in Melissa's purse, a drug prescribed to her, which matched what was in Sandra's body. During the search of Clover Road Baptist Church on April 6, 2009, investigators also uncovered a rolling pin stained with blood that was later determined to contain genetic material matching Sandra's DNA profile. To their horror, the investigators also found that one of the window blinds in the church was lacking a draw cord. Subsequently, the cord utilized to secure the Eddie Bauer suitcase was identified as matching the cord found on the remaining church blinds. This alarming discovery intensified suspicions against Melissa in the terrible crime, shocking both the authorities and the community with disbelief and horror. So, on April 10, 2009, Melissa Huckaby was taken into custody 5 hours after she willingly
drove to the police department for questioning.
Nothing we have done and nothing we can say will ever return Sandra to her family and to the community. But last night, we arrested Melissa Huckaby, a 28-year-old Sunday school teacher who lives at the Orchard Estates Mobile Home Park. And she has been booked into San Joaquin County Jail on suspicion of kidnapping and murder of Sandra Cantu. Information developed over the course of the last few days and during an interview that Melissa drove herself to the police department to participate in led us to develop probable cause to take her into custody at approximately 11:15 last evening. There's still a lot of work left to be done over the next several weeks to ensure that Ms. Huckaby pays for what she's done. There are no other suspects in this case. We do not anticipate any other arrests in this case. I couldn't begin to even theorize what her motive is. I'd like to thank the city of Tracy, the community, and everyone assembled here for the support and the assistance that you've provided us over the last 15 days. Our community will start to heal at some point. Today is going to be a very difficult day for everyone to be able to...
Placed under suicide watch at the San Joaquin County Jail.
The California woman accused of killing 8-year-old Sandra Cantu appeared in court for the first time yesterday. She faces multiple charges, including sexual assault. Melissa Huckaby is under suicide watch this morning. CBS News correspondent John Blackstone reports.
CBS News has learned that days before her arrest, Melissa Huckaby was hospitalized after swallowing 3 X-Acto knife blades. In custody, she's been on suicide watch.
After several hours, investigators confront Melissa in the interrogation room with all the evidence they found.
At 5:30 and 5:40, 2 people saw your car stopped on Whitehall Road. They saw you come from out of the bushes on Whitehall Road, and someone asked you what?
I was okay, and I said I was going to the bathroom.
Mm-hmm. What were you doing, Melissa?
It was an accident.
I told you it was an accident. I know it was. Accidents happen.
Kill her.
During interrogation, Melissa Huckaby denied everything, but later she claimed that Sandra's death was an accident.
It was was an accident.
I told you it was an accident. I know it was. Accidents happen.
Kill her. I went to church. I was scared. And when I came outside, I looked at my suitcase. I went to take it out and it was heavy. And she was in there. She wasn't breathing or anything.
What did she look like?
She looked pale. And I killed her. I thought that she was dead. And I panicked.
So what happened?
I tried to wake her up and she wouldn't wake up. And I didn't know what else to do.
She eventually confessed that she encouraged Sandra to get into the suitcase while playing a game with her own daughter. Melissa admitted to zipping Sandra inside the suitcase, but then forgot about her until it was too late. When Melissa finally returned to the suitcase, she found Sandra's lifeless body. Melissa claimed that she was playing a game of hide-and-seek with Sandra, suggesting that Sandra get inside the suitcase and jump out to surprise her daughter and Sandra's sister. Melissa stated that Sandra agreed to the plan. After zipping up the suitcase, Melissa said she forgot the child was inside. It wasn't until she arrived at the church that she remembered and unzipped the case, only to find Sandra appearing lifeless. She said she attempted CPR in a panic and also took a small wet towel to cool Sandra's forehead. Overwhelmed with the situation, she admitted she didn't know what to do. Later, she decided to dump the suitcase containing Sandra's body into a nearby pond, but investigators knew she was telling a big lie. When police further investigated Melissa's personal life, they came to know that she had a troubled past with criminal activities, depression, and other mental health issues. Melissa's legal troubles were well documented. Court records showed she pleaded no contest on January 9th to felony second-degree commercial burglary and misdemeanor property theft charges. A criminal complaint further detailed her history, including a 2006 property theft conviction that led to jail time in Los Angeles County. In November 2008, she was accused of attempting to steal from a store. The complaint noted she was on probation in San Joaquin County and had a court date scheduled. Additionally, Melissa had filed for bankruptcy in 2003, citing credit card debt and medical expenses. Investigators also interviewed Melissa's father, Brian Lawless. He said that his daughter faced ongoing battles with depression and encountered challenges in finding her path after completing her education. Later, the investigators interviewed Melissa's ex-husband, John Huckaby. He said she did suffer from depression. She did have issues with her self-persona, who she saw herself. Despite Melissa's ongoing struggles with depression, her husband described her as generally carefree and not prone to violent behavior. He told investigators they got married in August 2003 while Melissa was 5 months pregnant. Their marriage faced difficulties, leading to a separation in August 2004 and a divorce finalized in September 2005. As a result, Melissa was granted full custody of their daughter, who is now 5 years old. He said he was shocked when he knew how his ex-wife Melissa killed a little girl. He said, "My initial reaction was shock and complete disbelief," John Huckaby said. "It's not something you want to think anyone is capable of doing, let alone someone that you knew, and that's a mother of your child." He said when they initially separated, Melissa moved to Southern California to live with her parents, which greatly limited opportunities to see his daughter. He even said during a past custody battle, Melissa made accusations against him, claiming he was guilty of alcohol abuse and domestic violence, allegations Johnny strongly refuted. Johnny Huckaby, who had been out of touch with his ex-wife for over 3 years, was now seeking custody of their daughter. He had started a new family, remarrying and having 2 more children. Yet the idea of her being involved in murder and rape, especially of a child, seemed incomprehensible. So the trial began. At her trial on April 14th, Melissa Huckaby displayed her most emotional reaction when her criminal actions were re-announced. She closed her eyes and seemed to struggle to hold back tears. During the trial, prosecutor Thomas Testa argued that Melissa had carefully planned Sandra's death. He presented surveillance footage indicating that Sandra intended to visit Melissa's house. The prosecutor claimed that Melissa took Sandra to the church to help with decorations, where she then gave Sandra juice containing a powerful sedative. Prosecutor also said that Melissa waited for Sandra to pass out. After Sandra was unconscious, they claimed Melissa attacked her and then suffocated her to death. The prosecutor Thomas Testa initially sought the death penalty against Melissa Huckaby, as she had not yet pleaded guilty to the heinous crimes. However, a pivotal moment occurred during one of the trial proceedings when Melissa made the decision to plead guilty, taking full responsibility for her actions. During the trial, Judge Linda Lothus of San Joaquin County Superior Court questioned Melissa Huckaby, asking if she had discussed the matter with her lawyers and if she was resolute in her decision to plead guilty, giving up her right to a jury trial. Melissa answered yes. As Judge Loftus concluded her questioning of Melissa Huckaby, Prosecutor Thomas Testa expressed concerns about Melissa's mental state. He pointed out that Melissa's behavior in prison, including an incident where she attempted to harm herself, was unusual and raised questions about her ability to make rational decisions. Testa even said, "She appears extremely coherent today, but I just worry down the road." Prosecutor Thomas Testa seemed concerned that Melissa Huckaby might reconsider her decision to plead guilty. Loftus then told Testa, "She appears fine to me," but he still proceeded to ask Melissa if she comprehended the situation. As the legal proceedings continued, Melissa Huckaby's decision to plead guilty was a significant moment in the case. Her admission of guilt brought some closure to the Cantu family, sparing them from a lengthy trial. This important moment changed how things were going in the court and led to what would happen next in Sandra's case. Melissa's guilty plea made things simpler and gave the Cantu family some comfort after all they had been through since Sandra's tragic death. So, on June 14, 2010, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
May sit, come to order. Department 30. And intentionally, with malice aforethought, murder Sandra Cantu, a human being. There are 3 special circumstances alleged. In the first special circumstance, it is further alleged that the murder of Sandra Cantu was committed by defendant Melissa Huckaby while the said defendant was engaged in the commission of the crime of kidnapping in violation of Penal Code Sections 207 and 209. In the second alleged special circumstance, it is further alleged that the murder of Sandra Cantu was committed by Melissa Huckaby while the said defendant was engaged in the commission, attempted commission, or immediate flight after the commission or attempted commission of the crime of performance of lewd and lascivious acts upon the person of a child under the age of 14 in violation of Penal Code Section 288 within the meaning of Penal Code Section 190.2, parentheses A, parentheses 17, parentheses E. In the third special circumstance, it is further alleged that the murder of Sandra Cantu was committed by Melissa Huckaby while said defendant was engaged in the commission, attempted commission, or immediate flight after the commission or attempted commission of the crime of rape by instrument in violation of Penal Code Section 289 within the meaning of Penal Code Section 190.2 A17K. It is also put on notice that the evidence presented at the preliminary hearing will also be used for any violation of probation and a request for discovery.
Melissa Huckaby faced charges for the murder of Sandra Cantu. Additional charges were filed regarding the drugging of a 7-year-old girl, but this was later dropped as part of a plea deal. To avoid the death penalty, Melissa pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder and kidnapping of Sandra Cantu.
Her crime against a Tracy girl shocked the nation, and this morning we will find out the punishment for the murder of Sandra Cantu. Good morning, I'm Deirdre Fitzpatrick.
And I am Teo Torres. There are actually 2 hearings in the Sandra Cantu murder case today.
So the first one is the sentencing for Melissa Huckaby, and then the judge will decide whether or not to lift the gag order. KCR3's Leticia Ordaz joining us now live outside the San Joaquin County Courthouse in Stockton.
Good morning, Deirdre and Teo. I can tell you it's going to be a very busy day here at the San Joaquin County Courthouse. In just about 3 hours, Melissa Huckaby will face a judge and will formally be sentenced for the murder and kidnapping of little Sandra Cantu. And I can tell you that the community, as well as the victim's family, is very anxious for these proceedings to finally come to an end. It was last month that Melissa Huckaby pleaded guilty and will likely spend the rest of her life in prison without the possibility of parole. Huckaby's rape charge was dropped, and her guilty plea means that she escaped the death penalty.
During her sentencing, Melissa expressed her confusion about her own actions. Speaking directly to Sandra's mother, she admitted that she was unaware how to interpret her behavior. She said, "I wish that I could give you an explanation for what happened. I still cannot understand why I did what I did." After hearing sentencing, she also made this statement.
Words cannot convey the badly I feel for the pain I have caused you. It is not enough that I say I'm sorry, but that is all I can do. From the day Sandra has died, I've had to live with the consequences of what I have done. For the rest of my life, I'm going to have to live with these memories of the responsibility for her death. Not a day, not an hour.
This is what Sandra's father said after the sentencing.
We're supposed to forgive our enemies.
but I don't even know what to consider her, to be honest with you. And nothing that happens today gonna change. And nothing's gonna change life. I don't believe that in my heart I should hate or anything like that. You took the life of an innocent little girl, and she didn't do nothing. She's not even old enough to decide to eat ice cream yet. I stand at my job, and nothing changes, and nothing's gonna change the fact whether I cry
On April 16, 2009, Sandra's friends and family gathered to lay her to rest in a small pink casket. The community's love and grief were palpable, as over 600 people attended her funeral to say their final goodbyes. The tragedy of Cantu's death deeply impacted Tracy. To honor her memory, volunteers planted a tree and built a new playground at Jacobson Elementary School. One of her cousins, Janet Anderson, also started an annual celebration on Cantu's birthday called Tracy Celebrates Children. Over the years, hundreds of local kids have participated in this event, getting fingerprinted and photographed to aid rescuers if another child goes missing. The reasons behind Sandra's tragic death are hard to understand. However, the prosecutors believe that Melissa had planned everything because she wanted to harm Sandra deliberately. Melissa Huckaby never shared why she did what she did, leaving investigators puzzled. The documents also provided insight into a woman who has struggled with depression, a difficult history, and a habit of self-harm. So where is Melissa now? Melissa is currently serving a life sentence in San Joaquin County Jail, bearing the weight of her grave actions. Her time in prison serves as a reminder that such serious crimes have serious consequences. For the Cantu family, the pain of losing Sandra will never fully heal, but they find solace in the knowledge that justice has been served. The trial and conviction provided a sense of closure, affirming that Sandra's tragic death did not go unanswered.
Can I speak to your son?
Hello?
Sir, this is a 911 operator.
Okay.
Can you check? I asked her if she can do CPR. I can help you with that if someone needs assistance.
He's not breathing.
All right, do you want to do CPR?
I don't know. He's not breathing, and I don't know.
This exact kind of frightening call was received by the 911 service on the morning of May 25, 2013, a day when Marshall University was celebrating the graduation of a new generation of professionals. Mark and Joanna McDermot were supposed to be among the parents of hundreds of students receiving their diplomas. However, their day took an unexpected turn. This is the story of Mark McDermot, a model family man who was betrayed by someone he, although not related by blood, considered and raised as his own son for nearly 20 years. Mark McDermot was born in the early 1960s in Australia. Little is known about his upbringing and personal life, but it is known that Mark was the eldest of 5 siblings. The only known relatives are his father, Bruce McDermot, and 2 younger sisters, Tracy and Nicole, with Nicole being the youngest. According to some close acquaintances, Mark was not only a successful businessman, but also a kind and responsive person. Nicole described her older brother as a wonderful person who could never intentionally harm anyone. Very little is known about Mark's life, including his adult life. However, it is certain that at some point, he traveled to the southern United States. The circumstances and reasons for this trip remain unknown. It was in the US that he met Joanna Dunn, a single mother with a 4-year-old child. Even less information is available about Joanna's life, with most of what is known coming from her own accounts. However, the words she publicly shared were almost entirely dedicated to her son, who is the second main character in this story. Donald Wayne Dunn was born in the early 1990s in West Virginia, where he lived his entire life with his mother's family. His grandparents played a significant role in his childhood, as they cared for him for most of the time. The reason Joanna, a working single mother, entrusted much of Donald's upbringing to his grandparents was that she found it challenging to raise a child alone. Even when they did manage to spend time together, Joanna resorted to video games and television to entertain Donald on the rare days they were home together. It was difficult for her to give him all her attention. However, everything changed with Mark's entry into their lives. The couple quickly started a relationship, and soon after, they got married. Joanna took her husband's last name, and all three moved to West Virginia, becoming a very close-knit family. From the beginning, Mark and Donald had a very close relationship, as if they were truly related by blood. Some who knew them, including Mark's sisters and father, confidently said that Mark treated the boy as his own son, and Donald, in turn, regarded him as his only father. Their strong bond was tested when Donald was still a minor, and Mark and Joanna's relationship went through a difficult period, ending in a temporary separation. Despite Mark leaving alone for some time, Donald insisted on living with him rather than his mother during those months. The family had to endure another difficult period when Joanna was diagnosed with cancer. However, supporting each other, they managed to get through these tough times. Mark always made sure that his stepson had a comfortable life without any deprivation. He ensured that Donald never lacked anything he needed. Although Donald was a simple person who never asked for much, he seemed grateful for the peaceful and luxurious life his stepfather provided him. In 2008, when Donald graduated from high school, Mark took on the financial responsibility for his higher education at Rio Nueva Community College, where he studied for 2 years. Mark continued to pay for his education even when, in 2010, Donald transferred to Marshall University. Despite the fact that Donald was living with his girlfriend, with whom he had been in a relationship since he was 15, and her family, he always enjoyed the unconditional support of Mark and Joanna. It's noteworthy that their financial assistance was not limited to just tuition fees. They also covered his expenses for clothing, car insurance, and paid for his living and food expenses. Donald only had to focus on his studies. A responsible and dedicated young man, he strictly followed his daily routine and often canceled or declined plans with loved ones, citing the need to complete practical work or review materials for upcoming exams. Throughout his 5 years of university education, he adhered to this lifestyle, aiming to graduate on time without falling behind in any semester. Saturday, May 25, 2013, was set to be a significant day for him to receive his university diploma. However, what was supposed to be a special occasion for celebration turned into a bitter moment that would forever change his life. As the McDermots were preparing for Donald's graduation ceremony, a distressing call was made to 911 from their home.
What is your name?
Joanna McDermott, I shot my husband.
Okay, is he breathing?
No.
Was it an accident?
No, we were fighting.
You were fighting?
Yes, it was supposed to be a happy day. It's his graduation.
Your child's graduation? Okay, is your child okay?
Will the police be coming too?
Yes.
Authorities immediately headed to the McDermott's home. Sergeant Greg Keaton of the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office was one of the first law enforcement representatives to arrive at the scene. Upon arrival, he found Joanna, who appeared to be in a state of severe shock. Moving further into the house, he saw Mark, who was lifelessly lying on the couch in the living room, seemingly reading a book at the time of his death. At first glance, the 54-year-old man had 2 gunshot wounds to the head. When investigators moved the body, they discovered a 3rd wound in the back of the shoulder. The medical examiner who arrived at the scene confirmed that although the cause of death was the head wounds, death was likely not instantaneous. The amount of blood at the scene indicated that the longer Mark was alive, the more blood he lost. According to initial versions of the incident, Donald was preparing for his significant day, and the noise of the shower drowned out the loud sound of the gunshot, so he did not realize that Joanna had shot his stepfather until he came out of the bathroom and found the body in the living room.
All right, how old is your husband?
My husband is 54.
And you were just fighting?
Yes.
All right, did you shoot him in the side?
No, in the head.
In the head?
Yes.
Okay, try not to touch the bed, okay?
My son is in the bathroom. I want to try to go downstairs so he can help me.
So, how old is your son?
23.
All right, does he know what happened?
No, he doesn't know. He's downstairs getting ready for graduation.
The pistol was lying on the dining table next to a letter, presumably written by Joanna and addressed to Donald. In it, the distraught woman explained to her son that her marriage had become unbearable and that she could not remain in a relationship with someone she no longer loved. She also apologized for leaving his life without seeing him become a man. At that moment, Joanna and Donald were taken in separate cars to the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office, where an officer was to take their statements. Since Joanna called the emergency services, the case appeared to be another instance of domestic violence with a tragic end. In her conversation with the operator, Joanna claimed that she and Mark had argued, and in a fit of rage, without realizing her actions, she shot him in the head with her pistol. This was unexpected to the officers who took her for questioning, as she then made a confession that overturned her initial version, and thus, the entire course of the investigation. When the doors of the police car closed, Joanna revealed that in reality, it wasn't she who deprived Mark of his life, but her son, Donald. However, this was not all that the woman could tell, as the story turned out to be much more complicated than the investigators had assumed. Once in the interrogation room, Joanna explained to Captain James Barr of the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office the chronology of all the events that transpired on May 25, 2013. She mentioned that her son's graduation was scheduled for the early part of the day. In the morning, she had left to run some errands and buy groceries. Joanna returned home, and as she was about to get out of her car, Donald approached her and asked her to close her eyes and follow him into the house because he had a surprise for her. Trusting that her son had prepared something special, she blindly followed him into the dining room, where he suggested she sit down. At that moment, Joanna heard a distinctive click, and when she finally turned to look at her son, she found herself face to face with the barrel of her own pistol, which was in Donald's hands. The gun did not fire, and Joanna, completely frightened, managed to grab it and wrest it from her son's hands. She managed to overcome her panic, which allowed her to think clearly and devise a plan of action to save herself from becoming Donald's second victim. Seeing Mark's lifeless body, she quickly told her son that she was going to call emergency services and take the blame for the crime. Although the young man initially seemed to doubt her plan, he eventually agreed. During the interrogation, Joanna explained that she decided to call emergency services to protect herself from her own son, understanding that by confessing to a crime she did not commit, she would end up behind bars. Joanna added that she was sure that if she didn't do this, Donald would try to end her life. She also confessed that in the 23 years she had been his mother, she never thought her son would point a gun at her head and pull the trigger. The gun used by Donald belonged to her, and she explained that the only reason it did not fire was probably because she had pulled the slide back far enough on the semi-automatic weapon, which prevents a normal shot. Captain Barr explained that Joanna's story seemed entirely logical to him because from the first moment he saw Donald, he had a feeling that something was off. He noted that considering the severity of the situation, the 23-year-old young man appeared unusually calm and always maintained a neutral facial expression. For this reason, he ordered Donald to be placed in a separate interrogation room, away from his mother. From the beginning of the interrogation, Donald denied any involvement in the death of his stepfather, and this facade effortlessly crumbled after he was informed of Joanna's statements. James Barr did not have to resort to any intimidation tactics to get the young man to confess to the crime, nor did he have to pressure him or demand that he provide all the information to piece together all the details of the case. Donald voluntarily told him everything he wanted to know, and the story that unfolded was almost unbelievable. It all started after Donald finished his first year of college. Apparently, he was not doing very well in his studies and decided to drop out due to poor grades. He shared that initially, his classes were simple, and all he had to do was show up in the right room at the right time to get good grades. However, as the semester progressed, it required more and more effort. According to the young man, he felt that he did not have the strength to continue his studies. Instead of telling the truth, he decided to lie to Mark and Joanna. However, his close relatives were not the only ones he deceived. His girlfriend and her family were also unaware of what was happening. According to Rachel Rush, his girlfriend's sister, Donald, maintained a routine that gave the impression he was attending classes. He would leave and return home at regular times and spent most of the day in his room. He asked not to be disturbed under the pretense that he needed to focus on finishing an assignment or preparing for a test. The young man even falsified his grade reports. All this was just a carefully thought-out deception that continued for 4.5 years. None of the people in Donald's life suspected he was lying to them. His family's faith in him remained unchanged throughout the years, while he pretended to be a student. Joanna and Mark had no idea their son was misusing the money they provided and supported him throughout, not only financially but also emotionally. Donald claimed that he never intended to lie to his close ones for so long, but as more days passed, telling the truth became harder. The one thing that held him back from being honest was the possibility that Mark and Joanna would stop paying for all his expenses. Although he seemingly did not attach much importance to many of his material possessions, such as a car and expensive clothes, in reality, he did not want to give up his lifestyle, considering he had a lot to lose if his parents found out the truth. Over several months, Donald developed what he thought was the perfect plan to get away with everything. From the beginning, he intended to end his parents' lives. To avoid suspicion, he planned to leave a note similar to the one found on the dining table with the pistol. Donald thought that when the authorities read the note, they would conclude that the crime was committed by a woman trapped in an unhappy marriage who saw no other way out than to take her husband's life and then her own. Donald told Captain Barr that on May 25th, he surreptitiously took Joanna's pistol and kept it with him all day while pretending to prepare for his graduation. Before the second part of his plan failed, the young man decided to go to the supermarket so that the surveillance cameras would record him, thus providing him with an alibi. However, he did not anticipate that his mother's gun would jam at the moment he was about to pull the trigger, aiming at her head. Alex Willis, a close friend of Mark, told True Crime Daily that in the months leading up to this event, Donald had begun to show interest in shooting ranges. Although it seemed strange to him at the time, he never questioned it because it never occurred to him that the reason his friend wanted to learn more about firearms and how to shoot was his desire to attack the man who had raised him since he was 4 years old. The deliberations and conclusions that Donald reached baffled everyone who heard them. Later, James Barr shared that the young man confessed he had even planned the emotions he would display on his face when authorities arrived at the scene. He also thought about how he would financially support himself after losing the stable income provided by Mark, and decided to exploit the sympathy of his relatives as long as he could while they supported him. He planned to engage in sports to improve his physical form and, ultimately, when he had no other choice, to enlist in the police or the army. Reflecting on the real chances of success for his plan, Donald decided it would be easier to kill his mother and stepfather than to admit that he had been lying to them for almost 5 years. According to a legal document from the Supreme Court of West Virginia, published in April 2016, a month after his arrest in June 2013, Donald was charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder. Even before the trial, Donald and his legal team sought ways to delay the proceedings. A few weeks before the scheduled start of the hearings, the defendant, who was already in solitary confinement, had to undergo surgery on his right hand. His lawyers used the surgical intervention as a pretext to request a delay in the start of the process, arguing that during the initial sessions, Donald would be under the influence of strong painkillers. To decide on this matter, the court first required medical documents of the defendant. Eventually, the request was denied on the grounds that during the preliminary hearing, Donald showed no signs of being partially incapacitated due to painkillers. Therefore, the court deemed him competent to participate in the trial and approved the continuation of the established schedule. The trial took place in August 2014, more than a year after Mark's tragic death. The jury trial was presided over by Judge John A. Hutchinson, with David White serving as Donald's attorney and Christine Keller representing the Raleigh County Prosecutor's Office. Mark's 2 sisters, accompanied by one of their nieces, traveled more than 15,000 kilometers from Australia to witness the trial of the man whom they had considered a family member for nearly 20 years. Although detailed information from witness testimonies or evidence presented to the jury is not available, and there is a lack of photos and video materials, it is known that the defense wanted to include in their opening arguments that Donald was under the influence of illegal drugs at the time of the crime. However, there is no evidence that this was ever mentioned before or confirmed by any toxicological tests. A few days after the initial hearing, specifically on August 14, 2014, Donald Dunn was found guilty of first-degree murder of his stepfather, Mark McDermot, attempted murder of his mother, Joanna McDermott, and the use of a firearm. On September 5th of the same year, Judge John Hutchinson sentenced Donald to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the murder of his stepfather, and to 15 years in prison for the attempted murder of his own mother. After the sentence was announced, Joanna read an emotional letter to the court that she had prepared. In her statement, Donald's mother mentioned that something bad had happened at some point in her son's life, possibly after the illness of his grandparents, the pressure she put on him to study at the university, or the violent video games he played even when he was very young. She expressed her disapproval of the public image created of her son. She made it clear that she disagreed with the sentence handed down to him. But Judge Hutchinson responded that Joanna's disapproval had no impact on his decision. She made it clear that she disagreed with the sentence handed down to him. But Judge Hutchinson responded that Joanna's disapproval had no impact on his decision. He expressed his opinion that the sentence he imposed was the only way to restore justice in an unjust situation. He sympathized with the defendant's mother, as even under the circumstances, she wanted to shield her son from the consequences of his actions. After the verdict, Mark's sister and father expressed that they still could not understand how Donald could have taken the life of a man who had raised him as his own son for 19 years. Although the sentence would not bring back Mark, they were grateful for the verdict that was rendered.